We're here at the Finance Ministry in Valletta, a place Finance Minister Clyde Caruana has called his office for the past 4 years. Thank you, Minister, for having us. We're speaking just a few weeks after the MEP and local council elections which Labour won, but which left it shaken, I suppose. The party lost more than 30,000 votes in those MEP elections. What went wrong?
Election results do not change overnight, but rather there has to be a momentum that leads to something. Over the past months, there were certain indicators that were indicating that the public mood perhaps is changing as a result of things happening across the country.
Are you saying that you were not surprised by the 8,000 margin?
I was expecting a result between 18 to 20,000 margin. At least that was my feeling based on a number of things. Turnouts for public activities, the surveys themselves, the other anecdotal evidence that I refer to.
So 8,000 is still then, you would still consider a poor result compared to what you were expecting. So how do you explain this kind of sudden hemorrhaging of support?
So the thing that surprised me most, I was thinking that the turnout would be lower. Rather than staying home, people went out, they voted, they expressed their opinion in a very clear way.
For other parties and independents,
yes.
you mean?
So I think that in itself is a message that speaks volumes. So once the result was out, I reflected a little bit. And if we had to go back in time, so when there was Mintoff in the 70s, the Labour governments of the 70s brought about significant changes in the economy, the setup of the welfare state, name it and have it. Yet, the 1981 election was lost in terms of popular vote. When there was Fenekadami between 1987 and 1996, the Nationalist Party at the time brought a significant overhaul in terms of the economic change. But nevertheless, people thought that, listen, we have to move from that kind of model to something new. So my interpretation is that people, of course, always vote for something better, for something that improves their standard of living. And in a way, people's behavior is linked to the economic cycle, but also to the nature of the economy. And people as always, are after something which is better and perhaps something that improves also the quality of life. People are not just after money. People now, given that they are more affluent, they are also after a better quality of life.
You used two examples of the Mintoff government and the Fenekadami government. In both cases, the incumbent government lost.
Yeah.
And it was the opposition that came to power. If history is doomed to repeat itself, that doesn't bode well for Labour.
I'm going to be very, very clear about this. I think that the people spoke out in a very strong way. They expect that there is a change about the way how things are done. The Labour government is still in time to deliver the change. But people, I think they have made their voice very clear. They've expressed themselves very clear. We want change. And of course, as you said, no, it's either that government delivers the change, and I still think, and I'm very optimistic, that Labour can bring back all those thousands of votes back into the fold. But on the other hand, now, if we fail to inspire the change, and it has to be real change, then of course, no.
In which case, you think there is a chance that Labour might lose the next election?
As always, as always. People vote or confirm a government on the basis, on the deliverables of that government. So it's as always, every election is the government's to lose.
Polls, including ours, were off the target. Pollsters have spoken about various reasons why that might be the case. What's your take on that?
Well, that is something very interesting that has happened this time round. And I don't buy the reason where certain pollsters were saying that the undecided, at the end of the day, they just went one way in terms of voting for independent candidates. My take on the issue is that It's not that easy for someone to say that I'm not going to vote Labour given that this government has won by a 40,000 majority. So perhaps people were more shy, were more reserved in terms of expressing their opinion. And this, of course, has to be taken seriously because, of course, future opinion polls have to be taken more seriously because this element may also be present in the future.
You've warned that our population will balloon to 800,000
by 2040, yes.
If we continue growing at our 4% rate, right?
Yes.
Now, that in itself is a sort of tacit admission that GDP growth, our GDP growth, relies on the population growing.
No, that is a wrong assertion. So it's not that the population is leading to economic growth. If anything, our economy is an export-oriented one. So what's happening is that the type of investment that we have and that we are attracting is very labor-intensive. We have to start and change that. It's easier said than done. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to go for something which is more capital intensive, something which produces more value added. But we have to start. Because otherwise, if we keep on repeating the same thing, what will happen is that we will keep on attracting thousands of workers on the islands, and that is having its effects on the infrastructure. And as I said earlier on, people, they already had their say on what they think with respect to that. I mean, with respect to the population, I said that we will be 800,000 by 2040. If the current trends continue, we will be already at 600,000 by the end of this legislature.
By the end of this legislature. You've been talking about this, changing this economic model. You were probably the first frontline politician to talk about the need to shift our economic model. I think that was in 2021. We're now in 2024. It's hard to sense that change, that change is happening. What's going on? 3 years have gone by, and yet our economy seems to be, apart from lip service, strategies, committees, this type of thing, the economy seems to be going along the same tracks that it was before.
Let's be very clear about this. This is not something which is very easy to do. It involves long discussions, so all the social partners have to be on board for the simple reason that changing the way forward will have implications on their members.
You seem to be implying that social partners have been a stumbling block in bringing about this change.
No, I'm not saying that they are a stumbling block, but there is, as we say in Italian, tra il dire e il fare c'è mezzo il mare, no? And I'm saying this because at the end of the day, if we're going to change the superstructure of the economy, the way how our economy works, that is going to have a direct impact on the employers themselves. In various sectors of our economy, there are parts of industries that perhaps are not efficient and they need to restructure.
Do you have any in mind?
No, this is something that applies in general. I mean,
but surely
at the essence, we have to start doing more with less. Let me give you an example with the financial industry. Perhaps over the years, we were more accustomed than trying to attract business that looked at Malta only from a tax point of view. Mm-hmm. Now that is over. We have to look at things which give us more value added, such as, for example, aircraft leasing, family business. You need less people, but the amount of work that they do generates more value added. Mm-hmm. And that is the way forward.
Mm-hmm. Construction still looms large.
Yes.
The fact that it looms so large that it pervades so many facets of our decision-making suggests a level of undue influence within politics of the sector. Do you agree?
Yes. I mean, I reiterate what I've said in the past. I think that even here, voters at large think that it's high time that there is clear separation between the construction industry and political parties. I mean, the construction industry at the end of the day is just another economic sector that shouldn't be treated differently from manufacturing, the professional sector, finance, name
and
it
and
have it.
And you believe it is?
But that is why I'm saying that it should change.
Yes. Do you raise this within cabinet and government?
I always speak my mind.
And what's the general perspective?
I mean, I say what I have to say, then of course it's up to the rest to accept what I say or otherwise, no? but I always speak my mind.
And the facts speak for themselves the way.
I mean, I'm not trying to point fingers, far from it, but since I came into this office, I always promised myself that I will be always frank, direct to the point, and if I have to say something, I always try to do so.
When I look at the employment strategy you presented in 21, I believe, it focused a lot on upskilling the workforce, having a more educated workforce. It's something you harp on about, you talk about very regularly.
Because, I mean, again, it's very easy said than done, but our way forward is that we have to do more
With less.
in terms of value added with less. Because that is how countries get more affluent.
Now,
I mean, if we look at elsewhere in Europe, let's say the Netherlands, over there people on average work about 28 hours a week, yet their GDP per capita is more than double ours. Why? Because the workforce is much more skilled than ours.
So this is the big challenge here, is that when I look at education statistics for Malta, whichever way you measure it, from early school leaving to literacy to maths, science, wherever you want to measure it, we're mediocre.
Yes.
We're not at the bottom, but we're nowhere near the top, and we don't spend.
And that really pains me. It really pains me because we are one of the member states which allocate significant amount of money to education as a percentage of GDP, but yet we are in 2024 and still 40% or so of the youth, I mean 15 years of age, still fail to get 6 O-levels. And that is something that I can never accept, for the simple reason that times are changing, economies are changing, technology is always getting more sophisticated, and therefore we cannot ignore the times we are living in.
Do you feel a bit let down by your colleagues in education then?
This also starts at home. Parents should encourage their children to read, or perhaps dedicate more time in order to follow what is happening at school. So this is not just a task that should be borne by the state, but there is also responsibility within the family. And I think that this is perhaps one of the issues, the themes that require a national effort. And I'll tell you why. If one had to realize the big difference that exists in terms of income over a lifetime between someone who obtains tertiary education and someone who just stops at secondary schooling.
In terms of income?
In terms of income. Over a lifetime, the difference in terms of income can account to more than 1 million euros. So imagine you have a couple who are tertiary educated as opposed to another couple that are not. Over the lifetime between these two couples, the difference is more than 2 million euros. And of course, everyone can come to the conclusion what kind of difference 2 million euros can make to the standard of living of a couple.
Now, Roberto Bella last week gave a speech in which he said that the economy needs to move from one that's focused on economic growth to one that's focused on quality of life. Now, but the reality is that we are a bit like an addict, hooked on GDP growth, because if we don't grow our economy at the 4% clip that we've been growing it, then we're in big fiscal trouble. Is that not true? So
there's a big difference between economic growth and economic development. I mean, economic growth has to happen.
So you need to stick to that 4%.
Economic growth has to happen, and there's still improvement. I mean, there's still room for our economy to continue to improve and grow at 4%. But what needs to change is how that 4% is created. And we have to start from somewhere. I mean, the country has come a long way in this area, but I think that we need to not double, triple the effort in order to move in that direction.
Now, the EU recently just put Malta on its naughty step, if you want to call it that way, because of our excessively large deficit.
It was something predictable.
I was about to say, you knew it was going to happen. It was in the forecasts. You knew that these new rules were going to come into play. So what is the government's response going to be to this?
I'm not worried at all. There's a big difference between the excessive deficit procedure as of now and the excessive deficit procedure of 12 years ago. 12 years ago, the excessive deficit procedure was more of a guillotine approach. You exceed the 3%, then you have to cut immediately. Now, the way how we have agreed to change the rules, and they've changed last January, no? We agreed that there's more flexibility, but that flexibility is accompanied with prescription. And therefore, the rules state that in our case, at least there has to be a yearly minimum effort of 0.5% improvement in deficit, meaning that the deficit has to go down by that amount. And we have to make sure that if we want to do it on our own, without any interference from the Commission, we have to do that in 4 years. I'm going to disappoint all those people who were perhaps seeing glee in terms of saying, okay, this perhaps will bring down the Labour government, or there's going to be tax increases, austerity. Nothing of that will feature, no.
Subsidies will remain until the unit price of electricity can come down. Still.
I mean, that is why we have to work hard, yes, in order to meet these targets. So that, of course, when we are negotiating with the Commission, we can still justify what you're saying.
Are you confident that subsidies will remain?
As long as I meet my targets.
As long as the deficit can come down by 0.5 percentage points every year?
0.5%. And I'm very confident that, as always, I will meet my targets.
Okay. The moment that something happens or whatever, then that would be one of the...
I will make sure, and that is my job, to make sure that that moment does not happen.
So you're not concerned by one credit rating report after the other?
Not at all.
Flagging this as an issue?
Even though credit rating agencies flag that, they still give us good ratings.
Yes.
The ratings have not deteriorated, and that is because our debt to GDP ratio is still going down.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a month ago, 6 weeks ago, you sent out, or your ministry rather, sent out 270,000 checks in the middle of an election campaign. Is that a wise use of government money?
That is a measure which enables us to give more to those who earn less. I mean, income tax works the other way around, no? The more you earn, the more you pay.
Yes.
So the negative income tax, in this case, what you're referring to, that allows us to give more to those who need most.
In that case, wouldn't it make more sense to just raise the minimum wage or...
No. Because if you raise the minimum wage, that will have a cascade effect on the rest.
Was it your decision to send out the checks during an election campaign?
By and large, it's always, during this time of the year that it happens.
By and large?
By and large, March between May. I mean, if you go back over the years, it's always the same time of the year.
Could have been March.
It wouldn't have made a difference. And it didn't make any difference at all because...
It might have backfired.
We've just discussed a couple of minutes ago the result of those elections.
Yes.
I think that people have, matured, by far in order to be influenced.
To not be conditioned by these things.
Yeah.
You mentioned at a Times of Malta event, I believe, you mentioned that Malta's economy is, by and large, dominated by cartels. You said in banking, telephony, whatever, it's cartels.
That's because we're a small market.
Yes, but you speak matter-of-factly about something that is illegal. Cartels are illegal by law.
Fine, but even if there's the kind of tacit behavior, which we don't make it official, at times...
Of course, I don't believe I think the only cartel that is official is OPEC, right? every other cartel is a tacit one.
It is as a consequence of our small market.
But we have a law, the Competition Act, which says cartels are illegal. We have a regulator, which is meant to enforce that law. So an admission like that by the country's finance minister suggests that regulator is not really doing its job.
There is a fine line between what the regulator can do and what you can prove at law or in terms of numbers, and what you actually see. The fact that there are just a handful or one or two, that's going to restrict competition.
But there's a difference between having a handful of players and having a handful of players acting as a cartel.
The fact that, this goes to prisoner's dilemma, what students are taught in oligopoly. If two companies, they are enjoying what we refer to as supernormal profits, why try and compete? And at the end of the day, both of us end worse off. And that is what it is all about at the end of the day.
Are you happy with the work that the MCCAA does?
Why not? Yes.
You are. You've lost two parts of your portfolio in the past year. Malta investment and employment. But in general, the fact that you've lost these two parts of your portfolio suggests that you're falling out of favor within government.
Well, I've never tried to be popular, and that is why I told you earlier on that I just speak my mind. whatever I have to say, I say it. It's always, I mean, myself has always been like that. I've been involved now, I'm 39 years of age, and I've been involved in the party for the past 25 years. Whenever I had to say something, I always did my best to say whatever I had to say.
Losing employment,
and I won't change.
Losing employment, does that make it a bit more difficult to shift Malta's economic model as you believe it should?
Well, I mean, I'm saying what needs to be done, and I come to believe in that. Now, at the end of the day, change cannot be, it cannot just come by one person. It has to be a collective effort of a government.
Mm-hmm. There was a reshuffle earlier this year. There were rumors that you were asked to change portfolio. Is that true?
It wasn't the case, no.
It wasn't the case?
No.
Are you confident you'll still be finance minister in a year's time?
That is up to the Prime Minister to decide.
Will you run for deputy leader of your party if a position becomes,
no.
If it's opened up?
No, I'm not interested, no. And I'll tell you why. I've never been after titles or positions. I mean...
Clearly, if you weren't interested in titles, you would not be finance minister, right?
But of course, I mean, I do get your point. But at the end of the day, one can still deliver certain change or deliver certain effort. And in order to do that, you have to be in a particular position. Now, you've asked me whether I would like to go further up the scale by contesting. I'm saying that no, I do not have any intention at all.
If Brussels...
And mind you, Chris Fearn is still deputy leader of the Labour Party.
If Brussels, if you were to receive a request for a European Commission?
I'm not interested in that either. I mean, I still think that I still have a lot to offer over here.
And do you rule out ever running to be Prime Minister of this country?
The Prime Minister is Bertrand Borg.
Well, you never know in the future. It's not something...
I mean, a week is a long time in politics.
Clyde Caruana, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.